When it comes to isekai protagonists, KLEIN'S powers are fairly unique. He's not particularly overpowered, but the Beyonder system paves a path for him or pretty much anyone else to become overpowered. That said, the starting point for any Beyonder can be fairly weak, and that's especially true for KLEIN and his choice of the Seer path. It places him in much more of a support role, while his advancement to Clown makes him far more suitable for combat. Both provide their own unique abilities, yet when combined together they create the new and improved KLEIN we see in episode 10 and onward. It's in between though that we were shown so many different types of divination that I imagine it was hard to keep up with everything KLEIN was doing. So, in order to understand how exactly KLEIN'S powers work, we first need to start at the top, then work our way downward. That means understanding what it is a seer is capable of, moving down to the next sequence of Clown, then looking at what being at those levels does for him. His Grey Fog is a separate power all on its own, so that'll have to be analyzed apart from the abilities granted by the sequence potions. Now, with all that said, I suppose the first place to start then is the intuitive mastery over the abilities granted by the Seer potion. What I mean is that becoming a Seer doesn't immediately allow you to grasp its powers instantly. No, it instead gives you an innate proficiency with them. Their inherent traits like increased memory and enhanced spirituality makes it easy for the Seer to then learn and master rituals like astromancy, cartomancy, spiritual pendulums, and scrying, all of which are forms of divination allowing KLEIN to seek knowledge about the future or the unknown. What is divination? Well, according to Old Neil, it's the outcome of communication with the spirit world. The process of finding answers by putting one's consciousness into a higher dimension. I'll get deeper into the various methods of divination later, but for now just know astromancy is divination via analysis of celestial bodies like stars, planets, and constellations. Cartomancy is divination via playing cards. Spiritual pendulums does so via a weighted object like a crystal, then scrying is the stereotypical fortune teller method of a crystal ball or mirror. In theory, the type of divination tool doesn't really matter though, since the outcome will always be the same regardless. Now, since this is knowledge KLEIN needed to learn in order to use, the methods in which that's done is either through experimentation and summarization, being bestowed by the gods themselves, or recalled through the dangerous murmurs KLEIN occasionally hears from time to time. All provide the opportunity to understand what their potion has to offer. It's just some methods are more dangerous than others. Now, the first thing KLEIN learned after ingesting his potion was how to manage the physical manifestation of it. After mitigating its energy and reducing the seepage of it, KLEIN was taught what's called cogitation, a meditative state converging the potion's powers inward. It was while in this state that KLEIN could see and understand the truth, revealing knowledge only he himself could understand. The result was what Old Neil likes to call a mystic experience, a phenomenon only possible while in this state of cogitation. Next, KLEIN would learn how to use spirit vision, one of the most foundational abilities for pretty much any Beyonder. It was a mystical power that allowed him to perceive supernatural and non-physical phenomenon, one that needed to be trained in order to get better. With this, he could see the auras I talked about in a previous video, letting him discern anything from a person's health and emotion, all the way to the spiritual traces of organic material. The thing about spirit vision though is that, just like a muscle, if used too much it eventually becomes a burden on the soul body. Without proper training, using spirit vision can be incredibly draining and cause both headaches and hallucinations. That's why it was so important to build that muscle up. Recovering after was just a matter of getting rest. Now, a sort of unwanted ability KLEIN had gained after this was a passive sense allowing him to detect abnormalities or emotions even without activating his spirit vision. It was a trait attributed to his seer sensitivity, this innate perception to the spiritual atmosphere around him. Fast forward to a bit after this, and it was after coming to the understanding acting would allow him to digest his seer potion that KLEIN would embrace the role by joining a divination club. His first encounter with them would have him deal with tarot cards, a tool simply used to read what the truth symbolizes. So, it's KLEIN'S interpretations of them that should reveal the answers to the questions he's asking during the ritual. When it comes to probing via more thorough means, one of the risks is communicating with existences not fully known. Reason being that was always a clear path towards madness. Fortunately, it's not present with the divination he learned next, the method we see fairly often known as pendulum dowsing. This is the method that connects the seer's astral projection to the spirit world, allowing him to divine simple truths like good and bad or yes and no type statements. It's a very practical tool for the most basic of divinations. So, first you write a statement onto a piece of paper, hang the spirit pendulum over said paper, then close your eyes and repeat the statement 7 times over. Depending on how the pendulum is moving after, determines what the answer to your statement is. Clockwise rotation means good or yes, while counterclockwise indicates bad or no. No movement simply means it's neither good nor bad. The written statement shouldn't ever be a question, since apparently doing so wouldn't work. It has to be formatted like this instead of this. Such was one of the rules of divination. Deeper divination practices revolved heavily around symbolism, mainly because answers weren't typically something that could be accurately described by the information one could sense. More often than not, they appeared as indescribable experiences, direct revelations, or abstract characters and symbols, all of which represented different items and different meanings. So, it was only by grasping the ability to interpret these symbols that Klein could really take the next step into the world of mysticism. A good example would be how one might interpret the constellations. It was very possible symbols representing constellations or planets could appear in Klein's divinations, so it was important to know what they meant in order to understand them. It mainly came into play when dealing with what's called astrolabe divination, but that's a tool we rarely see used by Klein. Just know that Klein can interpret things based on the positions of planets and constellations. For a quick example on how that's done, say Klein wants to divine something about a specific person. By knowing the date and time of which they were born, Klein could read the star paths of that time to determine their fate. The method itself was extremely complicated, but with the seer's innate ability to memorize things easier, holding all this knowledge wasn't difficult at all for him. It was yet another trait that came with the seer potion. Klein could handle large volumes of information without forgetting it, a clear indication of his cognitive enhancement. So, Klein would train these core seer powers daily, practicing his spirit vision and dowsing techniques. He would go so far as to integrate them into his lifestyle, enabling the potion digestion process to occur faster. Obviously, seers, being as weak as they were combat-wise though, required some other training in order to offset that. So, time at the shooting range made it easier to prepare for practical combat. Now, the first time we see Klein use his powers in a real case comes from his search for Elliot. In a case like this, when a person being divined isn't present, usually a medium tied to them is required in order to facilitate their divination. The method Klein used was known as dowsing rod seeking, functioning fairly similarly to his spirit pendulum dowsing. All he had to do was wrap his cane with Elliot's amulet, enter cogitation and repeat the statement Elliot's location 7 times over, then let the cane do the rest. The cane would then point in the direction where Elliot was, allowing him to track his target easily. It was during this mission that Klein was shown to be able to perceive through walls with spirit vision, allowing him to detect a person's presence even if there was a room between them. He was also shown to ward off the effects of Leonard's Midnight Poet abilities, indicating a strong spiritual perception and extreme familiarity with cogitation. In fact, his increased sensitivity to the supernatural had even allowed him to detect a form of surveillance that shouldn't have been known to him. In any case, it was over time that Klein came to understand divination could be split into 3 main categories. The division made by how the revelation of said divination was come to. The first was through the subject's own spirituality, typically housing methods like tarot, pendulums, dowsing rods, and dreams. The second was from the fortune teller themselves, typically involving their own intuition and calculation. The third was from a fully external third party, a supernatural force influencing the revelation through means like a Ouija board or magic mirror. The former 2 were the ones Klein practiced the most, since the third carried a high risk of contacting malicious unknown entities, yet another one-way street to madness and insanity. It was shortly after that Klein had learned how to use ritual magic, a means of borrowing external help from a higher power of sorts. For him, that's typically the Evernight goddess, so we've seen a few times where he needs to request power from her. There was also the instance where he prayed to himself, granting him the power to draw a portrait he normally wouldn't have been capable of. The whole thing is actually kind of vague right now, so all you gotta know is that ritual magic seeks help and power from someone else. It's always possible to seek that help from an existence not entirely known, but just like everything else, that's sure to lead to madness. Now, it was during Klein's meeting with Anna later that we would see him implement spirit numerology, astrolabe, and dream divination. Astrolabe we already covered, but the other two are divinations we haven't yet gotten to. So, in spirit numerology, Klein can map a person's life stages and their yearly luck based on their date of birth and the current year it was. I won't go into the exact calculations, but the variables involved are a person's birthday path number, their birth month path number, and their birth year path number, each reflecting how a certain stage in their life is supposed to go. These all gave clues into the situation with Joyce, allowing Klein to see his life was represented by a number reflecting balance and harmony, while his current luck gave a number representing change, an accident, and risk. So, astrolabe revealed Joyce would survive the accident, while dream divination would provide symbolic visions confirming it. When it comes to dream divination, there's really not much to explain with regards to how it works. It's pretty much the same as the other methods. The only difference is that it gives revelations via a series of changing images. Now, all these powers aren't really beneficial in combat, a clear point we've seen time and time again in the anime. That being the case, as a seer, Klein's powers are more helpful as support over anything else. Even then though, his predictions and advice can only go so far, as his path was more predicated on guidance over control. What I mean is that as true as his revelations may be, there may not always be a time when he can change a person's decision. It's Klein's advancement to Sequence 8 that changes all that, making him far more effective in all things physical. His coordination, balance, agility, and speed were all improved, a result of greater control over his muscles, his body, and his center of gravity. The most noticeable change was the increase to his coordination, allowing him to easily perform feats like rope walking and acrobatics now. It's an incredibly useful ability that can be applied to a number of situations. Whether it be climbing walls, backflipping to dodge an attack, or navigating tricky terrain, Klein could handle all of that. I mean, the man can walk on rope as easily as he walks on the sidewalk now. So, I really can't express just how much more agile he is. That's not to say his strength wasn't enhanced either, though, as a small test indicated he was about as powerful as his combat teacher. That being the case, with a bit more specialized training, Klein knew he could leverage all of this to become even stronger. He figured half a year was what it'd take to become decent in combat, while only a few weeks was needed to become adept. So, where a normal person would usually take years to train in something like this, Klein's ingestion of the clown potion had once again given him intuitive mastery over it. He now had an innate proficiency for all the powers the clown potion had to offer. Such was the difference between a Beyonder and a normal person. It's aside from these physical enhancements that Klein would also gain predictive-like intuition, an ability he believes lets him perceive short, fleeting glimpses into the future of others' immediate actions. I wouldn't go so far as to call it straight-up foresight though, as his predictions were limited to people's movements and nothing else. It's an acquired skill, likely a product of his already powerful observational and analytical abilities. That and his newfound understanding of movement and coordination. So, where before Klein already had a decent handle on danger precognition, his new understanding of body control works in tandem with that to react to others on instinct. Things like attacks directed towards him can now be seen a whole lot easier. Just remember how the clown from episode 3 handled Dunn and the other Beyonders. Now, unlike how other Beyonders would immediately know whether their sequence upgrade came with new spells or not, Klein's inability to sense any meant that his didn't. He did remember the Nighthawk files describe Clown as crafty though, so when he considered for what cases that might be, two very beneficial uses came to mind. The first applied to non-combat situations, and that was from his improved control over his expressions and body language. With that assisting in future conversations and negotiations, Klein knew he could lie and mislead people easily now. The second was far more useful for combat, an ability allowing him to turn paper into piercing daggers. With a simple activation of his powers, Klein can turn sheets of paper into weapons as hard and sharp as steel. It's unclear whether this improvised weaponry can be applied to other objects as well, but for now it seems it's most effective with that. That being the case, Klein figured it was best to carry a deck of tarot cards with him. This meant he could always have a helpful divination tool on hand or quickly substitute it out for a weapon. Either way, Klein was now far more capable with both combat and his spirituality. It would certainly take a little bit of practice to become a master of everything, but just like with Seer, I'm sure that'll be no problem for him. Just remember, these new powers don't really mean anything when in the face of those who are a higher sequence than him. With most Beyonders being around sequence 9 or 8 though, this definitely evens the playing field for him. So as far as how powerful Klein is now, his role is still more suited for support, what with all the divinations he can perform, but he's also much more capable in a real fight, at least to the point where he shouldn't have to rely on his revolver all the time. Keep in mind this doesn't include his charms or the buffs he gets when in the Grey Fog, but that's going to be a topic for another video. For now, I hope you enjoyed learning more about his Sequence 9 and Sequence 8 abilities. There's definitely plenty more to talk about in the future. But anyway, if you liked what you saw, then leave a like, and if you want to see more, then consider subscribing. Until next time though, ciao!